Warning. This podcast frequently contains potentially triggering, violent, and graphic content. Listener discretion is highly advised. Hello again, Nightmare Society. Gather round for another episode of True Horror Stories. A big welcome to our newest official members of the Nightmare Society online campfire, Erica D, and the cat that lives in your walls. Welcome and thanks so much for your support, guys. It means a lot. At patreon.com/Nightmare Society, you can join in on a bunch of different perks, and all the support over there helps us create more content for you. So if you feel inclined, head over there and check it out. Other ways to support the podcast include following us on our social media at Nightmare Society Radio and sharing us on yours. It's really helpful in growing our audience. And if your podcasting platform allows you to do so, leaving a positive review is also very helpful. A great big thanks goes to our contributors for sharing their stories with us. User Almac26, user PurpleSteph19, and user Makina90. Now, on to our warm and uplifting stories for the just kidding. Prepare to be sufficiently creeped out. So, get comfy and prepare yourself for another episode of the Nightmare Society. Back in 2011, I was 21 years old, fresh out of university and living in the capital of the Philippines, Manila, for some months. I interned at a peace-building NGO, while also playing semi-professional football, soccer, in the country's national league. A strange combination, but both roles are relevant to the story. My experience starts one rainy Saturday afternoon in November. Football was canceled with a waterlogged pitch, but already downtown on my way to training, I decided to visit a fruit market listed in my Lonely Planet guide. This was pre-ubiquitous Google Maps days, at least in Manila. I must have looked lost, as two Filipino women, one middle-aged, one early 20s, approached me from behind, raising their umbrella over my head and asking where I was headed. After some friendly chit-chat, it came to pass, without my prompting, that they had lived in the same neighborhood that I'm from in London, England. A strange coincidence and one that lowered my guard. They offered to take me to a better fruit market, one that required a taxi to reach. Naive, trusting, and nervous about offending, I got in this taxi, leading me through the winding, maze-like back streets of a Manila slum. We exit and I'm utterly lost in an unfamiliar part of this sprawling city. Remember, this is pre-Google Maps and ride-sharing apps, leaving me at the absolute mercy of these women. With no fruit market in sight, they plead with me to come into their nondescript, low-rise home for food and drink. My youthful naivety and reluctance to offend once again get the better of me. Whether due to trauma or time, I can't really remember what the inside of this place looked like, but I do remember it was dingy, had a TV with karaoke hooked up, and there was a man waiting when we arrived. Realizing what a sketchy situation I was in, I was conscious of anything they gave me to drink, watching them open the beer bottles in front of me. A couple of drinks in, the karaoke was flowing. I felt physically fine, but deeply uncomfortable, vulnerable, and trapped, and was waiting for the opportunity to leave. A tray of barbecue meat was brought out, always associating drugging with drink, not food, I had very little concern over eating it. The naivete of this would become instantly apparent. Putting this pork into my mouth, it had a strange medicinal flavor, but it would be too late before I connected the dots. My final memory that day was the younger woman, uncomfortably close to me, holding a microphone and flirtatiously singing the chorus of Hey Jude by the Beatles, while I drifted off, unable to keep my eyes open. I have virtually no memory of the next 24 hours of my life. I would wake up in a darkened room in the middle of the night, 1,000 kilometers south of Manila, in a city called Davao. To be clear, this Davao trip was one that I had previously scheduled for work, leaving the day after this incident. Still, to this day, all I remember of the journey is waking up and seconds of sitting in a taxi on my way to the airport. I passed through customs, boarded a plane, collected my baggage, met my colleagues, and was driven to our work office/apartment, all with zero memory of doing any of this. My colleagues did not suspect anything was wrong with me, mentioning later that I just seemed tired. It took some hours after waking up to piece together where I was and what had occurred. $200 had been withdrawn from my bank account, but I still had my wallet and phone. While I can't be certain, I concluded that I had been fed a drug popular in the Philippines called Ativan. I read similar stories of people being spiked, functioning relatively normal, becoming pliable, but having no memory of the incident. This would explain how I withdrew $200 while seemingly unconscious. To this day, I feel deeply uncomfortable at what may have occurred after I passed out, particularly with the behavior from the younger woman towards me just before I passed out. But those 24 hours of my life are gone, and I'll never know what happened. So to the two women in Manila who drugged and robbed me, let's not meet. When I was 8 years old, my family decided to take a summer vacation and take us to a big famous water park a couple of hours away from home. It was me, my older sister who was 11 at the time, my little sister who was 5, and my uncle who was paraplegic, and his girlfriend. We get to the water park and my uncle and his girlfriend end up staying at the cabanas at the very entrance of the water park, due to the fact that it was the only place with shade, and he had no intentions of getting in the water with his wheelchair. So they let us go off on our own all day. Big mistake. Since there were only either single or double person tubes, my older sister decided to get on one with my younger sister and let me go on one alone, but just hold on to theirs. And that worked for a little while. But we got on the lazy river that went around the whole park, and at the end of the river they made it like very fast and crazy with waves crashing into you and stuff. I ended up letting go of their tube and flipping out of mine. By the time I even realized it, I had lost them. I thought it was no big deal, and I'd find them soon enough again. So I'm trying to get back on my tube, and for some reason I just can't do it. A man notices me struggling and decides to come help me. I finally get in and thank him and try to float away, but he hasn't let go of my tube. Instead, he starts talking with me and asking me why I'm all alone. I explain that I lost my sisters, and he suggests that he get on a tube with me because he doesn't want me to get lost or drown. I say okay, and we get on a tube together. He starts forcing me to ride all the slides with him and talks to me about how his hotel room is not far, and he has a whole bunch of toys I would love to play with. I actually started getting interested because I don't have many toys, and the ones I do have are broken from my sisters. He says that we can get on one last slide and we can head over after. I agree. While waiting in the line, he starts acting really giddy and weird. He kept swimming under our tube and would play with my feet and legs and told me they were pretty. There was a young couple behind us who was watching this unfold, and I guess they could see the discomfort in my face because they tapped me on the shoulder to ask me if I was okay and if I knew this man. He tried answering for me, but they cut him off and said they were talking to me. I reassured them that I was okay, but it was seeing the look on their face that made something click in my head and say that whatever was going on with this man was not okay. Once we got off the slide, I told him that I had to go, and once we got to the opening of the river, I wanted to just get on a single tube by myself because I needed to find my sisters. He tells me that I can't do that, and he needs to watch me, so I can't leave him. For some reason, as soon as he said that, fear just came over me, and I ducked out of the tube and just started swimming. When I look back, he was right on my tail swimming after me. I ended up swimming to the entrance of the river and got on a single tube, which he ended up grabbing and flipping me out of, saying I needed to get onto a double tube with him. I did not feel safe anymore, so I ended up running out and running to my uncle and his girlfriend. I didn't tell them what happened, just that I got tired of being in the water. After sitting there for a while, I saw no signs of the man, and thankfully my sisters made it back to the cabana safe and sound also, and we all left together. So, weird man that I met at the water park, I hope we do meet again, so I can punch you in the face for being such a creep. This happened roughly 3 years ago, when I was working for a small non-profit for mental health in Little Rock. I no longer work there, so I feel more comfortable sharing this, and honestly typing out my last experience was cathartic for me, so here goes. Our organization is statewide, but our headquarters was quite small. At the time, there were only 3 of us working at that office. When this all went down, only my boss and I were in. We were already quite stressed out because we had learned just days earlier that a recently fired board member had been stalking my boss. She doesn't get scared easily, and our job had us interacting with people who have done some seriously disturbing things. But this sufficiently creeped her out, so I was hyperprotective, definitely to a fault. Luckily, I had my work cut out for me, as the whole building and complex had cameras at every angle that our landlord checked regularly. It was around 2 o'clock in the afternoon, and the day had slowed down considerably. I took the opportunity to clean my office, since I could never keep it organized for long. Once I had filled up 2 massive trash bags worth of junk and old papers, I decided to step outside and make the short walk to take the trash out. When I say our organization is tiny, I'm talking we take out our own trash and clean our entire building up. Very tiny. I knew what my boss's stalker looked like and was fully prepared to deal with him, should he be on the premises. Our front door was kept locked, and I locked it back up as soon as I stepped outside. My head was on a swivel. If I could have turned my head like an owl, I undoubtedly would have. I knew I could mop the floor with this guy should he try anything, but I wasn't about to go searching for him. Looking out for my boss was my goal. On the way back to the office, I was happy to see only employees from the other offices outside. I turned the left corner towards my office door, unlocked it, and stepped inside. But before I could close the door, someone was directly behind me and said with impatience,
"I'm here to get Michael. Where's Michael?"
He said it so fast I didn't immediately register what he had just said. I'd actually jumped out of shock. How the heck did this man get behind me so quickly? All the cars in the parking lot were cars I recognized. and my spidey senses were flaring up. I'm 6 feet tall, and this man was right up there with me in height. He looked super thin too, which is saying a lot coming from me. But he looked intense, frustrated. It was the beginning of fall, and he had a big jacket on. Not something you would wear when it's still 80 degrees outside. He gave no regard to personal space, so I had to back away from him, causing him to come even further inside. Noticing this, I stood my ground. I told him that nobody named Michael works here, and that we're not a service provider. That was clearly the last thing he wanted to hear, because that only pissed him off. He began raising his voice, shouting,
"I know one of y'all has Michael. Where the is Michael?"
All I could say to him was that I have no idea who Michael is. I asked him if he was lost, how old he was, what he looked like. None of these questions were answered. He claims he was just over there, pointing to another facility just a stone's throw to the east, and they told him the same thing.
"I know he's here. Why are y'all giving me bull?"
This man was absolutely enraged. My efforts to calm him down were ineffective at best. I started getting frustrated myself. But that feeling quickly turned to concern when I saw the grip of a handgun sticking out of his jacket pocket. Everything clicked. I finally understood what I was 90% sure I was dealing with in that moment. It also hit me that I was trapped. He was standing in the way of our exit. My boss could have exited through the back door, but she was in her office and didn't know what was going on. I was not about to make a mad dash to the exit and leave her. My only option was to fight back, if it came down to that. I took a few steps towards the guy, ready to crash into his hand if he makes any motion to draw. I have disarmed plenty of rubber and unloaded guns, but the fear of permanent damage and/or death puts a lot into perspective. Finally, my boss stepped out of her office to see what was going on. I honestly don't remember what the man was shouting after I saw the gun, but he had not calmed it down. I was too laser focused on his right arm. My boss was met with the same responses and roadblocks I'd gotten regarding this Michael fellow. Despite all the stuff that had been going on with her former board member stalking her, and whether or not she'd seen the gun too, my boss made the ballsiest decision I think I've ever seen. To say I'm thankful we were in sync to make this work is putting it mildly. Displaying complete control and confidence, my boss told the man, "I think you may be looking for blank facility, just down here and to the left. I'm so sorry you were given bad directions, but it's still in this complex. Let me walk you over there right now." And walk him out of the door and to said facility she did. As soon as they were out the door, I knew what I had to do. I called the facility and warned them that my boss, whom they knew well, was walking a man over to their facility and that he was armed and looking for someone named Michael. Given that this facility serves a lot of patients under Act 911, there's almost always at least one police officer over there. When I saw the gun in his jacket, I came to the conclusion that this was an attempted hit on Michael. Gang activity has plagued Little Rock, Arkansas since the 90s, and at one point it had the most murders per capita in the US. During the early 2000s, it calmed down considerably, but within the past 5 years or so, gang violence has resurged in the city. Furthermore, I've had prior experience in Kansas with gang violence when a hitman came to our middle school to kill the son of a rival gang member in broad daylight. Luckily, he never made it inside. That means in both instances this was meant to be a message to the other gang. He was not hiding his face. He had no backup, and his face was on all of the cameras. I guess he had already made plans to go to prison and thrive there, but I don't know enough about gang life to say for certain what his follow-up was going to be. But what had me terrified at the moment was that my boss was right in the middle of the danger now. I panicked after calling the facility and stayed in the office. I'm kind of ashamed I did that. My boss returned after a certain amount of time, but I don't remember the duration. She didn't tell me anything new, only that she had led him there, and thanked me for calling them. She had not seen the gun in his jacket, but she knew something was not right about him when she got a good look at him in our office. She said she went mother hen mode by leading the danger away from her coop. He clearly had been given bad directions, which was mildly amusing. To be fair, just to do a Google Maps search of that road shows a misleading display of everything on the small street. To the left of our office, there are roughly 40 yards of trees that separate our complex from the facility he pointed to, so I guess he was just coming out of the tree line as I was unlocking the door, because I did not see him coming. My boss didn't tell me about any new information the next day, and I checked the police beat for weeks to see if anything was written about it. Thankfully, I didn't find anything in police beat about it, which means there was no one harmed. However, we worked with and trained law enforcement officers in crisis intervention, and they would sometimes give us some inside info, like where was or was not safe, where gang activity was increasing, etc. One lieutenant I worked with a lot eventually confirmed that the man was, in fact, trying to kill Michael over gang disputes. I don't know what his relation was to the would-be hitman beyond that, especially why a mental health patient was a target. But hey, we may have saved someone's life. Don't forget to share us with your friends. Sharing is caring. Thank you so much for listening, and until next time.
Sweet dreams.